Welcome back, guys. So this will be my final video on the candidates, once again representing one of the games from the last round, this time the game between Karjakin and Liren. To remind you, the situation was such that both players were still hoping to qualify, but for both of them a win was needed. Well, for Liren it was practically impossible. There had to be really a lot of things to happen in the last round, but Karjakin, in case of a victory, he would remain with reasonable chances to qualify. Right, so Rui Lopez was played, and this position on the diagram, I think it pretty much resembles one of the games from Karjakin's match against Carlsen. Sergei played Queen e2, Black replied with Queen d7, and in general, let's take a quick look at this position. So White's knight might prove to be somewhat of more use than Black's bishop, well, since the center is closed. White continued with b2, b3 here. I took a look at alternatives because e4, e5 might seem tempting to someone. So e5 immediately turns out to not be any good because Black all of a sudden just takes on a4, opens the b file for his rook. Black is doing more than fine. I mean, objectively, it has to be a draw with such a wrecked pawn structure and only major pieces being on the board. But yeah, if any side is better, it's Black. Right, so White can try to do the same with intermediate capture on b5. So ab5, ab5 to go for e5 now. Black takes on e5, goes queen d5, and White plays queen e2. This position, well, technically I would call it better for White, right? But draw is still like 90% probability, or maybe higher, But yeah, it's, I mean, from practical perspective, I would say White's position is somewhat more compact. Black is a bit overextended, so well, maybe White could have tried, but not in the game where he only needs a victory. Right, so Karjakin has played b2, b3. Then Black stops all the possible breaks in the center with e5, and then a nice move, rook a2. It failed to work in this game, but knowing this as an idea might be helpful. So first, White prepares to double on a file, and only then will open it by taking on b5. So here Black could have gone with rook a7. Rook a7 ready to meet ab5 with ab5, rook a1 with rook a8. And if White doubles, goes rook fa1 without taking on b5, then of course b4 looks like an improved version from the game. So Dean played b4 at once, which is still fine, of course. Knight goes to d2, rook to e8, rook a2 to a1. Yeah, no longer you need the rook on a2. Bishop to d8, simply going away from the f file. And then an interesting thing turns out that, well, in the long run, right, sort of statically, White's position is better, right? He's the only one who potentially has the pawn break with f2, f4, but White is simply not in time. Imagine White would have all the time in the world, so he will bring the king to a2, then put the knight on c4, go g3, and then open up with f4. Then I guess White would have a serious advantage. But yeah, he's not in time. And Karjakin's next move might be slightly criticized. The g3, perhaps a bit too early, creating those weaknesses around the king's position. So g5 was the reply. Of course, Black has to stop f2, f4, knight c4, rook e6. Black's plan is quite straightforward. So he wants to double or triple on f file. Sometimes rook might go to h6 as well. Sergei Karjakin made an interesting move, a4, a5. Securing him a b6 square for the knight in order to move this knight, to bring this knight to d5. So rook e went to f6, f3, and I guess you have to play f3 because otherwise Black might want to put the rook on f3, stopping White from playing f3, and then he might develop quite a dangerous initiative on the king side. So f3 is the must. Black replies with h5. And then objectively, white should have gone for f4 here. But of course, he would hardly have any winning chances. So takes, takes, rook takes, and then, well, black perhaps is advised to take with the rook, where after queen h5, black might have been better if the bishop would be of the opposite, of a different colors. With some bishop on e6, of course, black is much better, but bishop on d8 is one stupid piece, and therefore the position is roughly equal. Right, so instead of f4, Karjakin went for knight b6, somewhat provocative move, and it's quite interesting, right? Because the first reaction, what happens if I take and go queen b5, trying to win the pawn? And in this case, white breaks on the other side of the board with f3, f4, and it turns out that black's position is somewhat overextended. So with your queen being out of play, you do not want white to take on h5, therefore I thought maybe g4 is the move. And then white is safely better after f5, but fe5 might be even stronger. So if everything is getting exchanged here, queen f1, queen goes to f5, perhaps black still can make a draw here. But, you know, it's absolutely clear it's only white who is trying. Right, so there was no need to take on b6 for black. He went for queen f7. And at this moment, it felt like Karjakin is in a serious amount of trouble. King g2 has to protect the f3 pawn, h4 is coming, and then you cannot really prevent h4, h3. Because if you go g4, then black finally takes, he stabilized the king side, and now he finally takes, goes queen b7, rook a4, I just thought, okay, any move, queen takes b6, and, well, white's position looks almost like a fortress, but not quite, because black will play, under favorable circumstances, black will first defend the a pawn, black will play d5, so it will be a lot of suffering for white. So instead of g4, Karjakin went for knight d5, allowing a very nice tactical shot, h3 check, so you can't really take on h3, that's the justification, because black plays g4, and then you can't take the pawn on g4 neither way. If the pawn takes, the rook on f1 is simply hanging, and you can guess taking with the king is very, very dangerous, to put it mildly. White is getting mated in a couple of moves. So after h3, king g1, rook takes f3, and then, well, that was impressive. Karjakin spent quite some time here and found seemingly the best move. So g3, g4, preparing to build the fortress Sergei Karjakin has built in the game. So after king g7, white simply exchanges on f3, goes rook f1, forces the exchange of the last pair of rooks. And in this position, despite black is 2 pawns up, white can't really lose, because neither king, neither black king nor bishop can really path through this border, through the pawn chain. So black has tried for another 10 moves or so, and finally accepted the draw. After g4, there was another interesting try for Liren to go for queen e6, where if white takes on f3 with the rook, he loses quickly. Queen g4, check on g2, queen takes f3 or rook takes f3, both win. So he has to give the queen away. He has to take with the queen, queen g4. And it turns out, despite once again white loses some pawns after queen e2, it turns out that the bishop on d8 is such a stupid piece that it's only white who can play for a win. So objectively this position is a draw, but if you continue like grabbing the pawns, queen d3, rook d6, now it's already black who's in danger. So altogether, somewhat strange game where Karjakin needed to win. He opted for this safe setup, but feels like he quickly misplayed it, and then managed to shape up and find this g4 move. That's really remarkable. After that, I failed to find any way to play for a win for black.